boy, do I have good news for you. You can sew a button. I'm sure of it. It's easy. Watch. If it's not clear where the old button was, you'll need to determine where the new one should go. Put the garment on and mark wherever the buttonhole naturally falls. Full disclosure, I have not been trained at the French School of Button Sewing, but I have found that embroidery floss works really well for sewing on buttons. It's really strong, it comes in lots of colors, it's easy to find. I have this collection of all sorts of poorly organized, tangled embroidery floss, which I mostly intend to organize at some point. Ultimately, though, whatever thread you can get your hands on is fine. If you're using something a lot thinner than embroidery floss, say all-purpose machine thread, you're going to do a lot more passes through the button than you'll see in this video. If you're using embroidery floss, you're going to want to separate it into separate threads. Embroidery floss is made out of 6 separate threads, and typically you'll use a subset of those 6 threads. For this example, I'm using 3 of the 6 threads. To separate them, I'll put 3 of the threads in my mouth, hold one end of the floss with my right hand, and then the remaining 3 pieces of thread in my left hand. Then I kind of pull them apart, trying not to get it all tangled up in a big mess. Keeping it really taut and occasionally stopping to move my mouth and the left hand closer to where they all join helps with that. More thread is better because it will give you a stronger hold with less sewing, but you need to use a needle that will pass through your garment easily, and a needle that fits all 6 threads is probably going to be too big to pass through your fabric easily. Buttons are a great thing to get secondhand. You can usually find a jar stashed away in any crowded thrift store. If you only need one, any crafter in your life probably has a decent collection they'd let you dig into. It's definitely the economical way to go. I've gotten full jars for a couple of bucks, and that could be what you'll pay for a pack of 4 new buttons. Quality garments will also stow an extra button on the garment tag, so you can replace any lost buttons with an identical one. You may also be able to steal a button from a less necessary area. I've taken buttons from the collar of a shirt, for example, and used that to replace a button that was more functional. I keep my button collection roughly organized by size. This is my 5/8 inch bucket. The best way to figure out what size you need is just by pushing it through the buttonhole. You want something that is not super easy to go through, but you don't want to be struggling with it either. Think about the level of friction you experience in any of your clothes, and that's what you're targeting. Place your button on the mark you made through the buttonhole, and then mark either side of the button. This will make it a lot easier to make sure you're keeping the button in place as you sew, since your first mark will be hidden by the button. For a neat finish, you want to hide your tail before you even begin. To do this, insert your needle about 1 inch or 2 away from where the button will be, and run it in between the 2 layers of fabric if you're working with a waistband or a placket. If you're sewing into an area that doesn't have 2 layers of fabric, you can try to do the same thing in between the 1 layer of thick fabric or a nearby seam allowance. Pop the needle up just next to your first mark and through one of the buttonholes. Insert the needle into another hole of the button. Then place the needle about 1/8 of an inch away from where it came up, and gently pass it through 1 layer of fabric and back out where the needle first came out. If you're working with just 1 layer of fabric, you'll go all the way through that 1 layer. If you're working with 2 layers of fabric but are struggling to pass it through just 1 layer of fabric, just go ahead and pass it through both layers. This will mean you'll see some stitches in the back, but that is by no means a problem, especially if you can do so neatly. Pull the thread through that first hole of the button again, and then down through the second hole, through the fabric, and back up. Again in the same spot you originally pulled it up. Repeat this 4 to 6 times if you're using embroidery floss, and maybe more like 10 times if you're using a thin thread like all-purpose machine thread. If your button has 4 holes, repeat that process with the next 2 holes without cutting your thread in between. Once all your holes have stitches in them, give it a really good tug to make sure it is totally secure. Now is the time to do a few more stitches if it feels wobbly at all. To secure it, I'll stitch back and forth in the same exact place 3 or 4 times, just underneath the button so it's kind of hidden. Next, you'll want to pass the needle in between the 2 layers of fabric, or a nearby seam allowance, for 1 to 3 inches, just like we did at the beginning, to hide your tail. Trim your thread, and you're all set.